$10 a gallon of profit from the peak.
State-run oil companies are a mess.
All the focus has been on the supply side for a long time.
By 2015, we're going to have this big shortage. That's really just propaganda and a pretext to invade more nations and an excuse to do that.
This is a highly disputed topic.
If we believed that, you know, what they said back in the 1970s, based on current usage and technology, we would have been out of oil today.
It says the U.S. is vulnerable and the government is unprepared for unacceptably high risks of oil supply shocks. The U.S. Geological Survey says that there is plenty of oil in the world. Why is there so much disagreement? Why can't anyone agree on exactly how much oil there is in the world right now?
Sadly, have such a poor data reporting system that we won't know with any clarity that we have passed peak oil until about a year after the event, or 2 years, when it's startlingly clear.
People need to understand that oil production in countries across the world is in decline.
Now, this is all just part of fear-mongering.
The peak oil theory has really swamped the world.
That we are on the verge of actually replacing global warming by this term peak oil.
No. Will we peak? Someday we will peak, but it won't be because we don't have enough oil.
Energy peak, oil peak, and everyone's panicking.
Where world oil production is going to go into decline.
And so they're going to lie and say that we can't get you more oil and just basically rob people. So no, we do have to worry. Oil prices are already exploding.
They're saying peak oil is coming very soon. The report found most experts project a peak and subsequent decline in world oil production could occur without any warning anytime between now and 2040. Now, why such a wide range? The quality and the availability of data concerning oil reserves makes it very difficult to make accurate.
Just when we think it's going to run out, there are new discoveries. How do you deal with that issue?
We're not running out of oil, but we haven't built a new refinery in over 25 years because the government and the oil companies won't allow it. So they've created an artificial scarcity.
The best new oil basin we will ever find is called conservation.
You hear a lot when they talk about peak oil is that we're running out of oil. You know, you hear this, but we've been hearing this for 150 years. These people have been running around like Chicken Little, yelling that we're running out of oil, and the reality is they're discovering more and more places that we have oil, especially in this country. There were estimates historically of how much oil we've had, and those estimates have always historically been low, and the more time goes on, the more oil they're finding.
Well, we are definitely running out because it is a finite supply. I'm sure you're aware, oil is a product of the history of the earth. It's the decomposition of organic material from life forms that have existed on earth millions of years ago. As those plants and animals died and they got buried in the ground or in the sediments on the seafloor, they eventually decayed, and that decayed material, through the burial heat and pressure inside the earth, converts it to oil or natural gas. Yes, peak oil is a concept that was developed by a man named King Hubbert, who worked for a major oil and gas company back in the 1940s and 50s. And his concept was that with any deposit of oil and gas, through the time it's discovered until it's totally depleted, there is a bell-shaped curve in terms of the amount of oil that can be produced out of it. And his concept of peak oil was that there is an increase in production for a period of time, you reach a maximum peak of total production, and then that amount of production declines.
There's actually enough hydrocarbons in these tar sands in Alberta, Canada, to fuel the entire planet for the next 100 years. So, you know, there's plenty of resources out there. Actually, in our country, United States alone, we have the U.S. Congressional Research Service, who have recently told us that the United States actually is the #1 source of energy in the entire world. They are saying that we're running out of oil in general, but it's true that the oil that's easiest to get is perhaps limited in supply, but there is many other sources of oil that are out there. It's just not as economical to get.
The primary reason that we haven't already converted to those alternative energies, the technology actually exists, and you're seeing solar cars and electrical cars being created in research settings. Even here at Western Michigan University, we have a solar car that was built by our engineering students perhaps 10 years ago. And there's lots of solar energy opportunities that are out there. The primary concern is the cost. If you compare it to the cost of fossil fuels, it's just so much more expensive that the average person is not going to do it until they have no other choice. As the price of fossil fuel goes up, and as the price of gasoline rises, these other alternative sources, particularly things like electric cars or solar cars, would become more attractive because they'd become price competitive.
As far as other energy sources that there's nuclear. That's one of the big sources of energy that we can rely on in the future. They've kind of got a bad name due to some accidents that have happened in the past, so it's kind of stopped the use of nuclear power in recent years, but I really believe that that's going to be a reliable and an efficient source of energy to use in the future. There's, of course, wind and solar, like we talked about a while ago, but they don't really have, they're not really economical at this point in time to utilize for a major source of energy. But then they've got a technology called the fuel cell, which I understand that's going to be something that could potentially be used in the future as a source of energy for vehicles and that type of thing.
Well, I think because of the demand and the numbers are staggering, we use in the United States something like 7 billion barrels of oil a year. It's a huge number. And when you start looking around in the world to find any single source that's going to provide that kind of energy, it's almost impossible to supplement that with one single source. I think the best strategy is to have a multi-phase approach where we develop all of the possible energy sources that we can while continuing to use the existing conventional energy sources. So I wouldn't say that we should be thinking about an either-or kind of option for future energy. I think we should be looking at an all-inclusive option for trying to find all the energy resources that we can, because as our populations grow, we're going to need even more than the billions of barrels of oil that we use today.
I believe the industry who produces the oil have a responsibility to make sure that they're doing things in the most environmentally protective way that they can, and they have gotten better over time.
Well, I think the rate of change that exists in our society is more dependent on economics than anything else. And if the public is educated, they're aware of what the real costs are on things. And so I think they're perhaps a little more accepting of economic changes. I know everybody's always concerned about the high price of gasoline, but if they understood that it's a commodity that's becoming rarer, more difficult to get, and more expensive to get, perhaps that would help a little bit.
Well, I think you just have to do your own research. You just gotta, look through the internet and trying to find credible sources of information, and you're going to find a lot of information. So you're going to have to sort through it and try and determine what's factual and what is just opinion or myth or things that are being made up. And you got to do the research and try and find out what you believe to be true.
Yeah, and I think that there are resources out there that are certainly reliable. The Energy Information Agency Administration from the U.S. government, Department of Energy, has a huge database of all the states and all the statistics, both on production and consumption. And a lot of universities, such as our resources, have lots of available information for the public. So people should just get out and educate themselves. I think that a well-informed public is probably the best thing we could possibly have.